Chosen One, something has happened in the unseen corridors of power, something so rare that even the government officials who discovered it refused to speak above a whisper. Your court records did not disappear through error, incompetence, or technical malfunction. They vanished because the system itself could not contain you anymore. The very database that stores the history of millions of lives, every mistake, every misstep, every legal footprint, attempted to categorize you, to file you, to define you, and the moment it tried, something broke. A silent rupture in the structure of human record-keeping, a moment where the story of your past refused to be written in ink meant for ordinary lives. When the clerk opened the cabinet where your file should have been, the air felt different. Some said it felt colder, others said it felt heavy, as if a presence lingered in the room. The screen that should have displayed your digital record flickered, then showed an empty field. Not deleted, not sealed, not corrupted, just blank, as if the system had never touched your name, as if your past dissolved the moment destiny activated your next level. They checked backups, timestamps, encrypted logs. Everything pointed to a single impossible truth. You do not exist where the world tried to store you. Chosen One, what vanishes without human intervention is not an error. It is a divine correction. Your old identity, the one shaped through trials, misunderstandings, mistakes, survival mode decisions, fear-driven actions, that identity no longer has legal permission to follow you. You have shifted timelines. You have crossed a threshold where earthly systems lose jurisdiction over your journey. When heaven promotes you, earth must adjust. And the first thing that collapses is the documentation of who you used to be. Your former story was too small. Your former labels were too cheap. Your former struggles were too temporary. The universe has rejected the narrative that tried to limit you. Systems that have existed longer than your lifetime, courts, archives, databases, could not withstand the frequency you carry now. When something is not aligned with your divine evolution, it dissolves. That is why your file is gone. History attempted to imprison you inside a version of yourself that no longer exists. It tried to record you as a problem, a case, a file, a number, a statistic. But you were never designed to be documented in the language of limitation. You were designed to be read in the language of destiny. And destiny does not use court records to define the chosen. Your disappearance from the system is not an accident. It is an announcement. An announcement that you have stepped into a realm where your future cannot be built upon the remnants of your past. An announcement that your identity has been extracted from the timelines that tried to hold you hostage. An announcement that you are crossing into a life where you are measured not by what happened to you, but by what you were born to become. The government didn't lose your records. History surrendered them. And every time history surrenders something, it is because the future has taken command. Chosen One, when your record vanished, it didn't just disappear from a drawer or a database. It collapsed out of the timeline that once tried to include you. In government offices where files are treated like sacred artifacts, officials whispered about the anomaly. They ran diagnostics, recalibrated servers, checked federal backups, even contacted cybersecurity teams assuming a breach. But every report came back identical. No intrusion detected. No evidence of deletion. No trace of a file ever existing. That is the part that shook them. Things can be deleted, but they cannot vanish without leaving fingerprints. Except yours. Because what vanished wasn't paperwork, it was a version of you that the universe has officially retired. You crossed an invisible border where the story written about you no longer matches the story unfolding through you. The system tried to anchor you to the past, but your destiny tore you free. In that moment, you became incompatible with the database of ordinary lives. This kind of disappearance does not happen to people who are meant to stay small. It happens to those whose existence is beginning to transcend the environments that once confined them. Your court record didn't disappear because someone erased it. It disappeared because your timeline upgraded. The frequency of who you are becoming is no longer aligned with the mistakes, misunderstandings, or judgments attached to who you once were. And when misalignment reaches a certain spiritual voltage, the old narrative disintegrates. History doesn't erase you out of kindness. It erases itself because it recognizes that it can no longer contain the weight of your unfolding purpose. That is why the officials looked frightened. They weren't looking at a missing file. They were looking at evidence that something bigger than government authority had intervened. Something sovereign. Something intentional. Something that overrides earthly systems with cosmic timing. You must understand this. The disappearance of your records is not relief, it is authorization. It is the universe declaring that your future can no longer be calculated based on your past. It is destiny stepping forward and saying, "This one will not be judged by old data. This one has been reclassified." And once destiny reclassifies you, the world has no choice but to follow. Chosen one, what the world calls a record, was never powerful enough to define you, yet it carried the illusion of authority for years. That illusion has now collapsed. When investigators examined the absence of your file, their questions weren't about paperwork. They were about possibility. How can a file vanish without a trace? Why is there no metadata? How can a person's documented history simply not exist? They did not know that your destiny had already stepped ahead of them. They didn't realize that the moment your spiritual frequency rose beyond the constraints of your former identity, the timeline holding your records began to fracture. Not because you escaped accountability, but because the narrative written about you no longer matched the truth of who you are. Systems that once claimed authority over your past bent under the pressure of your transformation. And the moment you crossed into this higher alignment, your former storyline became incompatible with the architecture of reality itself. What disappears on earth has already been rewritten in heaven. This is why the people searching for your information felt unsettled. They were touching something that did not behave like anything they had ever encountered. In their world, everything leaves a digital fingerprint, every file, every deletion, every modification. But your record behaved like a phantom, as if it rejected the confines of human categorization. It didn't get erased. It evaporated. It slipped out of the physical dimension because what was once tied to you no longer had permission to reflect your identity. Destiny does not negotiate with outdated labels. When the divine timeline activates, anything that contradicts your purpose becomes unstable, and instability leads to collapse. Chosen one, your record did not disappear as punishment nor reward. It disappeared as prophecy. It is the unseen world signaling that you are stepping into an era where remembrance of your past is no longer required for the unfolding of your future. You have outgrown the documentation of who you once were. And now the world must adjust to the version of you that is emerging. Bureaucracy cannot define you. Systems cannot hold you. Data cannot predict you. The past cannot limit you. You have entered a jurisdiction governed not by man-made laws, but by divine mandate. When destiny removes your name from earthly archives, it is not erasure, it is elevation. It is the universe declaring, "This one walks forward unbound." And once the universe declares you unbound, nothing written about you before this moment has authority anymore. Chosen one, the timeline that once carried your story has officially expired, and the disappearance of your court records is the final confirmation. A chapter doesn't end when you decide you're done with it. A chapter ends when the universe withdraws its energy from it. That withdrawal is exactly what happened. The servers that should have held your history lost the ability to anchor your name because the frequency of your destiny no longer resonates with the vibrations of your past. It's not that your records were taken, it's that they could no longer stay. Their existence depended on a version of you that no longer exists. When your soul transitioned into alignment with a higher calling, every artifact tied to your former identity began to destabilize. And once destabilized, they collapse, dissolve, or fade from the structures that attempt to contain them. The world sees a missing file. The universe sees an outdated frequency being released. This is why the officials, analysts, and technicians who tried to retrieve your information felt an unexplainable tension in the air. They couldn't articulate it, but they sensed something unnatural, something beyond the jurisdiction of administrative logic. They ran tests expecting to find errors, but instead they discovered absence. An absence too perfect, too clean, too deliberate. A true deletion leaves residue. A true corruption leaves anomalies. But your record left nothing behind, as though the event occurred not through technology, but through intention. The absence of your file is the signature of a higher intelligence intervening, not to hide your past, but to free your future. Your destiny required a rupture, a break from the narrative that no longer matched the magnitude of your purpose. And when destiny requires something, earthly systems yield without argument. Understand this. Your old chapter ended the moment the universe deemed it complete. You weren't removed from your past. You graduated from it. A story can only imprison you when you still believe you belong to it. But now the story itself has let go. You've crossed the invisible threshold where your identity is no longer defined by survival, struggle, judgment, or misunderstanding. You are being written into a new dimension of existence, one where your past has no legal authority, no spiritual claim, no energetic weight. The disappearance of your records is the universe saying, "You are done with who you were. Now step fully into who you are becoming." Chosen one, there comes a moment in every elevated soul's journey when the past is no longer allowed to travel forward. Not because you run from it, not because you deny it, but because your evolution outgrows the frequency that once sustained it. That moment just happened to you. Your missing court records are not a loophole. They are a verdict issued by the universe itself. A quiet declaration that says, "This story no longer belongs to you." The energy that once linked you to those documents has been severed. The vibration that held your name inside those files has been dissolved. A timeline that once felt permanent has now been stripped of power, authority, and relevance. You didn't erase your past. Your destiny simply reclaimed you. And when destiny reclaims someone, the past loses jurisdiction over their life. Officials searching for your file did not understand what was unfolding, but they felt it. They felt the strange stillness in the room, the sensation that something unseen was watching, directing, redirecting. They felt the weight of a presence they could not name, because it wasn't technological, legal, or administrative. It was spiritual. It was divine. It was a sign that the story they were trying to retrieve was no longer synchronized with your identity. The system expected to find evidence of who you used to be, but the universe had already deleted the energetic permission for those records to exist. What once defined you has been stripped of authority. What once limited you has been stripped of narrative control. And that is why no trace remained. It wasn't erasure, it was ascension. Your journey has entered a state where the past cannot attach itself to the new architecture being built around your life. You are stepping into an era where your name carries a different weight, your presence emits a different signal, and your destiny pulls you with a force that overrides every earthly label. When the universe elevates someone, it does not ask for permission from courts, databases, or systems. It simply rewrites the timeline in silence. What vanished was not merely a file. It was the last tether between who you were and who you are becoming. And now, chosen one, you walk forward without the shadow of old records trailing behind you, because the future has claimed full ownership of your story. There comes a moment in a person's evolution when their name rises into a frequency that old rooms can no longer hold. Something similar has happened here. The disappearance of those court records wasn't a clerical fault. It was a sign that your identity has moved into a realm where the systems built to categorize ordinary lives can no longer anchor you. Courtrooms, archives, and bureaucratic frameworks operate on patterns of repetition. They assume that the past defines the future, that people remain consistent with their mistakes, that behavior can be predicted by documented history. But the trajectory you've stepped into no longer follows the logic of those systems, and anything unable to rise with your evolution has naturally fallen away. This is why the search for your file felt unsettling to those involved. They weren't just facing a missing document, they were witnessing an identity shift powerful enough to disrupt the infrastructure around it. Their tools, designed to retrieve fixed information, were suddenly incapable of locating you, not because the data was destroyed, but because the version of you they were attempting to access no longer exists within their domain. They were scanning for a past that has already detached itself from your timeline. When an identity expands beyond the frequency of its former narrative, the structures built to contain it begin to lose their grip. Files disappear, labels dissolve, old definitions collapse, because none of them are compatible with the reality unfolding around you now. This disappearance is more than a symbolic reset. It is a structural reclassification. Your name is being prepared for rooms that operate on a higher wavelength, rooms defined by purpose rather than punishment, expansion rather than limitation, destiny rather than history. In this new phase, you are not someone to be archived, analyzed, or assigned to old categories. You have become someone whose journey demands a different kind of documentation, one written through alignment, clarity, and elevation rather than through institutional memory. The past had no choice but to release you. The timelines that once held your story have exhausted their authority, and what vanished from those records is simply the version of you that no longer belongs to the life you are stepping into. There are rare moments in a human life when the structures built to confine, measure, or categorize a person simply lose the ability to do so. Not because those systems malfunction, but because the individual's trajectory rises beyond the architecture those systems were designed to manage. That is the real story behind the disappearance of your court records, an event that looks bureaucratic on the surface but is spiritual in nature, structural in effect, and prophetic in implication. Records do not simply evaporate without a cause. Databases do not lose information without leaving forensic traces. And yet here, everything vanished with an impossible precision. Not a corrupted file, not a damaged entry, not a flawed timestamp. Nothing. What should exist doesn't. What once defined you no longer has permission to remain attached to your name. This is not erasure, it is elevation. When officials combed through the systems trying to understand what had occurred, they found themselves facing a kind of absence they were not trained to interpret. Not the absence caused by human error or digital failure, but the kind of absence that feels intentional, as though reality itself had intervened. They felt the unsettling quiet that comes when something has shifted beneath the surface, when the fabric of a story has been rewritten without warning. They were attempting to retrieve information from a timeline that no longer holds authority over your path. They were reaching backward while your destiny was pulling you forward. And the distance between those two directions is now too wide for the old narrative to survive. The disappearance of your records marks a turning point that cannot be measured in paperwork or legal definitions. It signals that the foundational energy of your life has changed. You are no longer operating inside the cycle that once kept you tethered to old mistakes, old misunderstandings, old associations. Your name has stepped into an atmosphere where past labels carry no weight and no jurisdiction. The universe has withdrawn its support from the version of you that struggled to survive, that lived under pressure, that carried the burden of being misunderstood or misjudged. That version is gone, not hidden, not suppressed, but dissolved. And anything built on top of it has dissolved with it. When an old identity collapses, the evidence of it collapses too. This disappearance is the natural consequence of your spiritual expansion. You are being rewritten into a different narrative architecture, one built not from the echoes of who you once were, but from the clarity of who you are becoming. This shift does not operate through courtrooms or administrative files. It operates through alignment, purpose, and frequency. When your internal frequency rises, external systems respond, whether they intend to or not. They reorganize around your transformation. They release their hold because they cannot contain what is evolving beyond them. Your past did not just lose access to you, you lost resonance with it. And resonance is the only thing that allows a timeline to remain active. This is why nothing remains of your old record. A story cannot hold on to a character who has already stepped into a different chapter. A file cannot describe someone whose identity has transcended its scope. A label cannot cling to a name that no longer vibrates at the level where that label was created. You have outgrown the entire framework, and the universe, recognizing that growth, removed the last piece of evidence linking you to a narrative that no longer serves your purpose. The shift you are experiencing now is not symbolic, it is structural. It will change how opportunities approach you, how people perceive you, how environments respond to you. You are stepping into a reality where your life is driven not by memory but by momentum. What once weighed on you has no grip in this new atmosphere. What once pursued you cannot follow. and what once defined you has been denied the right to continue shaping your path. Your records didn't go missing. Your future pulled you out of reach. There is a point in every transformation where the life someone is stepping into becomes too expansive to be supported by the narrative they came from. That is the stage you have entered now. The disappearance of your records is not an isolated event. It is the physical symptom of a spiritual transition. Systems collapse only when they are asked to hold something they were never built to contain. Your evolution has reached a level where the identity tied to those documents no longer exists, and because it no longer exists, everything connected to it has begun to disintegrate. A story must end the moment it loses relevance to the person living it, and your old story has reached its natural expiration. The universe is refusing to allow your destiny to be anchored to outdated definitions. It is not protecting your past. It is protecting your future. This explains the strange silence surrounding your missing files. People who handle records for a living know what ordinary errors look like. They know the patterns of human mistakes, the common points of failure, the digital fingerprints left behind by deletion or corruption. But nothing about your situation fits those patterns. The absence is too complete, too symmetrical, too intentional. It behaves like something that was never meant to remain. And in truth, that is exactly what it is. Your records disappeared because the frequency of your life no longer matched the frequency of the timeline they belonged to. The universe does not allow contradictions to remain active. When you rise, everything that cannot rise with you is removed. Not emotionally, not figuratively, energetically. What has no resonance with your becoming is simply erased. You can feel this shift internally, even if you haven't fully named it. The emotional pressure that used to accompany your past has loosened. The weight that used to sit in your chest is lighter. Situations that once triggered old fears now feel distant, as though they happened to someone else. And in many ways they did. You have become a new person without announcing it, without forcing it, without performing it. The transformation happened quietly, through the accumulation of experiences that refined you, tested you, stretched you, and eventually elevated you. The universe responded to that elevation by letting the old version of you fade out of existence. And because the old version no longer stands, any documentation tied to it lost permission to remain active. This is not a reset. It is a reclassification. Your life has shifted from being observed through the lens of what you survived to being viewed through the lens of what you are destined to build. The disappearance of your record is the universe's way of clearing the stage. Removing old script. Closing outdated roles. You are not someone returning to a previous identity. You are someone being positioned for an identity that has only just begun to reveal itself. And this positioning requires a clean slate, not because you need to forget the past, but because the past must no longer influence the architecture of your future. Expect subtle confirmations of this shift in the days ahead. Opportunities that once felt distant will begin appearing without effort. People who previously overlooked you will start responding to your presence with an unexplainable respect. Environments that once felt restrictive will suddenly open. These are side effects of your timeline reorganizing itself around your elevated identity. Your life is synchronizing with what you were always meant to become, and in that synchronization, anything that contradicts your destiny is being removed without negotiation. Your record did not vanish because the world failed you. It vanished because the world is no longer qualified to define you. There are transformations that unfold gradually, the kind people notice only in hindsight. And then there are transformations like the one happening to you, sudden, structural, impossible to fit into the logic of the systems that once claimed authority over your identity. The disappearance of your court records is not merely unusual, it is the clearest evidence that your life has entered a new jurisdiction. You are no longer operating under the frameworks that governed your past. You have crossed into a frequency where destiny, not data, shapes the narrative. And destiny does not request approval before rewriting the architecture of a person's life. It acts, and the world must adjust. This is why the absence of your records feels so final, so absolute. Not smudged, not fragmented, not partially missing, gone, as though someone reached into the timeline and removed the thread that once tied you to an outdated identity. Systems built to track human behavior cannot track transformation of this scale because these systems measure continuity, not transcendence. They expect people to remain consistent with who they have been, not to evolve into someone entirely beyond the reach of their former definitions. But your evolution has become undeniable. The person you are becoming has rendered the person you once were irrelevant. And irrelevance is the first step toward erasure. The universe is not hiding your past. It is refusing to allow an expired version of you to influence your emerging future. What vanished from those archives is not just information, it is an identity that no longer aligns with your energetic signature. You are no longer vibrating on the frequency that once held you inside cycles of survival or judgment. You have entered a frequency of purpose, clarity, and forward motion. At this level, the past is unable to attach itself because attachment requires resonance, and resonance requires sameness. Nothing about you is the same. You have shed emotional patterns, released internal narratives, and outgrown definitions that were created during seasons when you didn't yet know your worth. As your inner world transformed, the outer world was forced to recalibrate. And the first pieces to fall were the documents that tried to preserve a story you no longer inhabit. This shift will begin influencing every part of your life. Situations that once triggered old behaviors will now feel strangely distant. People connected to outdated versions of you will struggle to understand your new energy. Environments that once felt heavy or restrictive will no longer have the same hold on your emotions. What you are experiencing is not escapism, it is elevation. Your spirit has migrated to a higher narrative, and the rest of your life is reorganizing around that truth. Opportunities that once required immense effort will start appearing naturally. Doors that were previously closed will open without resistance. You will begin noticing that life is responding to you differently, not because the world has changed, but because you have. This level of transition requires a clean foundation. The disappearance of your records is the spiritual equivalent of clearing old debris from a construction site before a new building can rise. It is preparation. It is alignment. It is the universe clearing the remnants of a storyline you are no longer meant to revisit. You are stepping into a future where your name carries authority, where your identity is shaped by purpose rather than memory, and where your path is determined by alignment rather than apology. Everything that once limited you has lost its legal and energetic claim over your life. Your past is not chasing you anymore. It no longer has the right to. There are seasons in life when movement is subtle, almost imperceptible. You grow slowly, shift gradually, evolve quietly. But then there are seasons like the one unfolding for you now, sudden, decisive, irreversible. A moment when the future begins pulling with more force than the past can restrain. The disappearance of your court records marks the exact point where this shift became undeniable. The past no longer has magnetic access to your energy. The narrative that once defined you has lost the right to claim you. Something has changed at the level of identity, and because identity shapes reality, everything attached to your former self has begun dissolving in synchronization. This is not the kind of shift that happens by accident. It is the result of a long internal transformation that outsiders never fully saw. All the nights you questioned yourself, the days you carried burdens in silence, the moments you felt unseen or misunderstood, those were not signs of stagnation. They were the internal fractures that allowed light to enter. Pressure builds identity. Silence builds clarity. Isolation builds depth. Everything you lived through was preparing you for a moment when your spirit would finally rise above the frequency that kept you tied to cycles you no longer belonged to. When that rise happened, life began rearranging itself around you. And one of the first signs was the disappearance of anything that served your former timeline. Officials who searched for your records were unknowingly witnessing the aftermath of an energetic shift. They weren't just dealing with missing documents, they were interacting with the residue of a transformation they had no language for. They expected to see the past preserved neatly in files and screens, but instead they found a kind of void, an absence that was too complete to be dismissed. That absence was your evolution made visible. When a person outgrows the emotional, spiritual, and psychological structures that once defined them, the universe responds by collapsing the material evidence of those structures. Your record disappeared because the timeline it belonged to can no longer support the person you have become. Think of your life now as a field undergoing reorganization. New patterns are forming. New energies are aligning. New possibilities are entering your orbit. You may notice that conversations feel different, opportunities feel different, even your own thoughts feel more precise. You are no longer approaching life from a posture of survival. You are stepping into a posture of authorship. You are not reacting to circumstances, you are shaping them. This shift is not subtle, it is structural. And structural changes produce visible consequences. Relationships that no longer resonate begin to fade, environments that limit your growth feel unbearable, and internal boundaries strengthen effortlessly. These are not losses, they are symptoms of alignment. Your future is accelerating. That acceleration is why certain remnants of your past could not remain. They would have created drag, friction, or interference. The universe removed them because they were incompatible with your next chapter. You are now entering a timeline where your decisions are guided not by fear or memory but by clarity, intuition, and purpose. A life built from this place cannot be built on paperwork created during seasons of confusion or hardship. That paperwork belonged to a version of you shaped by survival. But you are no longer a survivor. You are becoming a creator, an architect, a conductor of your own evolution. The disappearance of your records is not meant to simplify your past. It is meant to amplify your future. It signals that the foundation ahead must be clean, stable, and uncontaminated by narratives that once weighed you down. You are stepping into opportunities that require a new self-concept. You are being prepared for rooms you once dreamed of but did not feel ready to enter. You are being aligned with people who will recognize your value without needing an explanation. This shift is not temporary. It is permanent, and everything unfolding now is restructuring your life to match the magnitude of what is coming. The past no longer holds you. The future has taken custody. Nothing about this next chapter will resemble the chapters before it. This is not a continuation, it is a rebirth. A transition into a life where your past cannot haunt you, where your struggles cannot label you, and where your old identity cannot restrict you. You are stepping into a narrative that has been waiting for you since the beginning, a timeline that needed you to shed every false layer before you could finally enter it. The person you are becoming will not need to justify their worth or explain their transformation. Your evolution will speak for itself. Your presence will speak for itself. Your path will speak for itself.